Hi everyone, welcome to the Aware, Relaxed, Connected podcast. Join me as we explore approaches and orientations towards cultivating the physical body, the internal landscapes, the mind, and our relationship with reality as a whole. I'm your host, Craig Mallet. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of the Aware, Relaxed, Connected podcast. So this week I am in an interview with my good friend Joe Fairleigh, and you'll see from the interview that he has plenty of interesting orientations towards this idea of self-cultivation. I really enjoyed this chat. Joe has always a lot of insight, and everything we talk about when we get together and geek out like this is always somehow shifting or helping my perspective to evolve even more and provoking me to go deeper into my practice. So I'm always happy to chat to Joe. I suspect he'll be on the podcast reasonably regularly. We often teach workshops and things together as well down in Newcastle. So I hope you enjoy the chat, and let's just get straight into it. So I'm connected to my buddy Joe here. We've just been having a bit of a chat about what this is going to be like, because he's actually the first interview off the blocks, which I'm doing here. And the idea of the interviews is really just to get more perspectives on this concept of internal or personal self-cultivation idea that these days it seems more and more we need to do something to actually just keep ourselves sane and level and able to navigate the life. And I've got so many friends like Joe who do all sorts of cool versions of this, everyone with a slightly different history and a slightly different flavor. And part of the idea of the interviews was just to get to know all my friends who I know who are sick at whatever they do, and let them share their story and share their thing. So yeah. So Joe's here. Hey Joe, how are you?
Thank you, mate. It's so good. I'm excited and yeah, super happy to chat with you as normal.
Sweet. Yeah. So I was just before we hit record, I was just telling Joe that I'm a fly by the seat of my pants, non-playing person, and Joe's even worse than Joe. He's just like the leaf on the wind. So when I go into workshops and stuff, I've never planned a workshop in my life. I just have an idea of the topic and I go and see what happens. And I'm doing the same with the podcast and the same with these interviews. So I don't really have questions prepped, but because I'm good at this and I know you're good at it, we're just gonna cruise through it and see where it goes.
Yeah.
So maybe we can't assume the viewers know anything about you at all, or I should say the listeners, because this will be on audio only. So maybe just introduce yourself. What's your background, roughly speaking, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, great. And, I think that's the only way to do it is winging it and, just spontaneously going for it. And again, yeah, appreciate it. And, my focus of this will be just to share and to hopefully sort of spark some inspiration, I guess, in people that listen as well, because there is many ways that we can do things. Yeah, very briefly, my sort of health and spiritual journey and practice, I feel like it started the day that I was born. As long as my memory goes back, I felt like I was already thinking on a little bit of a different level, and the way I perceive things and the way I learnt or struggled to learn, especially through school. And then I realized that there were certain, really important aspects of the way that I learnt, then it sparked me and all of a sudden I felt intelligent. Whereas if I was taught in a sort of old school structured way, I was like, whoa, what, this makes no sense and has no relevance to my life. So I guess I was seeking some really quality teaching from a very, very young age. And there was a few people here and there that sort of grabbed that for me. And, the big ones were my spiritual teachers in Thailand, who spent the majority of their life in living in Buddhist countries and doing what we would understand as like a traditional yoga practice. And they've always spent time in Japan, in India, and in Thailand. And so they've still to this day been a huge part of my journey and spent a lot of months and years and time with them. And, both of those individuals being, well above my age, had that beautiful sort of senior feeling as solid mentors. So I see them as mentors, or just beautiful people in the background doing their work, and then they just share their journey with me, not telling me how or what to do, but just sharing it. So that started in my early 20s. I broke out of my drafting engineering world, and obviously was always, really into sport and things like that. So I entered that world kind of looking for peak physical performance, but not knowing that I was diving deep into the mental aspects of this and the spiritual aspects of practice. And then very quickly, they realized that I had this sort of deep drive for health knowledge at a really core level. And so I pretty quickly eliminated most things that I wanted to study and got into Ayurvedic medicine because as far as written text was concerned, it was the oldest one. So it was a pretty obvious point. It's like, okay, we'll just keep going as deep and as far as I possibly can. And so obviously Chinese medicines come into that. And then that hasn't stopped. So it's gone into everything, naturopathy and herbal medicine and functional diagnostic medicine and integrative medicine, physiology, anatomy, the whole works. So that's been a forever journey. And then very briefly, personally, I've just been basically into the athlete world, I guess. Like I love surfing and I love training, and that was my superpower to get me through school was just to do sport. So that's the background. Yeah, and the journey's still continuing.
Yeah, man, it doesn't end, does it? Yeah, your physical athletic history is nothing to be scoffed at either. I remember you showing me a while back some of your MMA fights, which was super cool to watch. You've done a lot of martial stuff. You're also epic surfer, man. You run these like retreats in Mentawai, right?
Yeah,
Mentawai
correct.
is how do you say?
Yeah, mental I.
Cool. Yeah, so maybe just talk a little bit about that because we both, I think we met through the movement culture world, right? I can't remember
Correct.
exactly who introduced us. Maybe it was Rod or Joshy or one of those guys in Newcastle. Um, but we were both on the kind of, yeah, physical development side of things, just becoming, you know, sick at doing movementy stuff at that time.
So
And then slowly but surely, I think we were both maturing in a similar way at the same time and getting more into the cultivation side of things at the same time too. But let's start with the physical because I think once you get into cultivation work, the physical can be like, that's kind of crude compared to this refined work. And, people can like turn their nose up at it a bit, but I find that to be a really, really important part of practice. So yeah, tell us a bit about your athletic history, the stuff you've done and what you learned from that and what you find important in the physical world after all your experience.
yeah, sure. And, fast forward quickly, and that was, I think, the strong connection for myself with you was just that I felt like I found that, like a brother somewhere else who was, had been so involved in the physical and was also just had more depth to them, wasn't willing to give up on, that this was all there was. It was like kind of shaking at the cage to try to find out what else was involved. And so for me, I played rugby league my whole life. My dad was a strength and conditioning coach for the Knights in the NRL. So from the age of 6, I went to every game and I traveled on the buses and planes and all around Australia. And, I ran out on the stadiums in the big games and was in the dressing sheds when everyone's blowing up and swearing at each other or celebrating. And like the craziness of, adult masculine sport, like I was in the thick of that in my formative years. And so it actually did shape me a lot because, there was so much expectation and so much pressure on those people that, we all know that, being around that in your young years, you just take it on. And so I never realized what I was really absorbing. So being in those environments and, there's players winning grand finals and there's hundreds of thousands of spectators and worldwide sort of publicity. And that was my everyday existence. So then when I went to school, and the teachers just totally, lacking motivation and inspiration, like I'm not going to listen to that individual. Like I found it so boring. It was like absolutely mind numbing. And what I didn't realize was it was just I was used to adults who were pushing their limits. So that was the framework in which I went at my sport. So rugby league was the majority of that. Surfing is a free time thing. So that's like the all the time in the background is the ocean. But rugby league was the weekend sport. And then my brother and my dad, beautiful humans, very strong, very, very masculine, a lot of testosterone. And so I had to learn to defend myself pretty early on. And we were always in pretty wild situations, to be fair. So martial arts was a pretty obvious place. So I was fascinated by that, but I got really dedicated at 15 and I started to, I looked for a good teacher, and boxing was the place I began. So at 15, I started training literally every day, boxing, and then soon enough, I started competing just in on small scale stuff, and then you do the obvious sort of state title things and all of those sort of whatever. It's a pathway. So I got right into that from 15, and playing I got to a point of playing, pretty good level, in rugby league, but I was always a pretty small guy, so, everyone was just trying to knock my head off, and that was great. I was kinda used to it, and I'd always have concussions and black eyes, and it was that was kinda normal, for me, but I just really loved the individual sport of boxing, of martial arts. It was something where I spent my whole life playing with, 13 other people on the battlefield, and you can kind of like, you blend and you merge, and you can blame other people, or you can get a sense of satisfaction in the group environment, but you can't always know how you perform. And I found it fascinating in boxing that once the judge, the referee literally puts his hand in front of you between two people, and you kind of look that person in the eye. It's like, yeah, there's nowhere to go. It's actually a square, like it's a box, and that box has ropes, and it's like four corners, and it's like you're not getting out of here. And the aim of the game, it's so stupid, really. Like, but it's fascinating. The aim of the game is just to literally punch each other in the head as best as you can, and avoid the same thing happening. And it's a crazy mentality, but it's a very fast way to learn about yourself. So again, that was the root of the reason. It wasn't like I wanted to be an amazing boxer. It was like, wow, this is a highway to teach me about myself. So when, that referee would wave that hand, it's fully game on, and game on, it's mostly about you and how you're dealing with those situations. Very quickly then I realized this is great. I got pretty decent at it. And it was an everyday thing and still has been for 20 odd years. But of course, the natural progression is, okay, I don't know how to kick. So my coach amazingly had a long history in Kokushin, so a traditional full body contact Japanese martial art. So he introduced me to the whole kicking world, which was amazing, and it really expanded on the discipline, and it had a deeper connection than just the boxing. Had this rough, barn shed, rusted truss, leather, stinky. Guys get off the train, like, it's real, like, shaven head trainers, and it's full legit, and that place for me, weirdly, is so comfortable, and home, but it did lack a bit of spirit. I thought, "Where's the guy sitting in the corner meditating?" And it was like, "Yeah, no, here's another group of guys jumping off the train, keen to punch your face in." So it was different, but the Japanese arts, gave me that perspective that there was something deeper in the martial art, and then that led me to pursue it. I got a little bit discouraged, I guess, just in that particular style because it just seemed so regimented and too much structure, and that, as you know me better than most people, I needed more of the freelance, element to it and more of the creativity. So I was like, "Great, I can kick now, I can punch, elbows and knees, I'm not sure what to do with those." So Muay Thai was the next, transition. A really beautiful friend of mine, Sarah Murray, she was rated, I think kickboxer, Muay Thai fighter, number 1 in the world for 6 years. So she became my trainer and introduced me to that world, and we had some amazing time. And what I loved about my time with Sarah, and Courtney, really big influence for me. When I spent time with the girls, training was training, but there was a definite spiritual connection. It was like we would breathe and we would meditate, and the music was different, and then they were going and winning world titles. So, that was such a sigh of relief, and obviously a natural subconscious yearning that I was having. So that was all excellent, and probably some of the funnest years of my martial arts sort of life. And I still crave the connection with the girls now. Again, being around, remembering those formative years in the sort of NRL scene, I'm always looking for, there's no satisfaction. There's no end goal. Like, you don't even know, but you've just absorbed this mentality of like, we just keep going, keep going. So I realized quickly, I was like, okay, great. I can punch now. I can kick. I can use my elbows. I can use my knees. What if someone grabs hold of me? And ta-da, here we are again. Jiu-jitsu starts. So, 5 years later, still competing, loving it and learning. And I'm on that journey. And that's a long journey in itself. So my entire physical background has revolved around martial arts,
Yep.
which then, as a side to that, you can't just do that. So that's where movement became a thing, and I learnt from people like yourself and Simon Thakor and Rafe Kelly and Soishi and people from Fighting Monkey and then, Rod, has been influential just in his energy, and then, Joshy and guys like that. So where we had backgrounds in traditional strength training, traditional, cardio training, and just realizing there's so many holes in this thing. There's so much emptiness. There's so much, yeah, being critical, but I think intelligently critical. You sort of know if I do this and I just keep going, you know what's going to happen. The body's going to break. So,
Yeah.
that movement world then became almost the primary thing, I guess, of exploring physically. Like, how do I stretch? How do my joints work? How does my blood flow? How do my lungs work?
Yeah.
And all those things have then gone off from that path, but not off. It's like a big tree. And things like free diving came into it for me, like deep
Mm.
dive breath holding. And, I trained a female athlete to a Guinness World Record last year. And these things have like transcended what they originally were. And
Yeah.
that's gone, yeah, like I love bow hunting and I love everything. I love mountain bike riding. It's like I love rock climbing. It's like I love,
Yeah.
just jump off something, do a backflip, like climb a tree, whatever. And so now obviously that progression is all encompassing and that's a beautiful place to get to because then it's like the beginning again.
Yeah, yeah, I was talking about that in the second episode of my podcast, right? That drive that comes from curiosity, not FOMO.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we're approaching stuff just because it's like there's so much to learn. We could learn this and we could learn that. And let's just jump into something that seems cool and see what's there. So I want to kind of unpack a little bit of what you said. Particularly, you were talking about like the pushing of the limits that never ends in the Western approach to physicality. And behind that, I see this charge of an imagined finish line, right? If I just get the gold, or if I just become the champion, or if I just, you know, meet some extraordinarily high level of performance, then I'll know myself and then I'll be whatever, without problems is kind of the tone of it somehow. Like I'll just get past all my problems if I push this to some sort of level. And what I discovered quickly is that's just full of shit. That's just it doesn't exist, right? You get the gold and then you're like, oh, I still have to deal with my family when I get home. Or it's still a bit achy here. Or even worse, all that pushing is starting to break the body apart. And so I became a lot more interested in like tuning in and feeling what the body actually wants to do and where its limits are. And that involves some exploration of pushing limits, right? Because sometimes you assume they're closer than they are, but also sometimes you assume they're further away than they are. And that's where we came into the movement world, started exploring this kind of things in a similar way. But I want to really hear about your maybe like this kind of critical mind that you brought into the things you were doing and in particular, still to the movement world, right? Because there are some big if you've been involved in that world, there's this kind of like tone at the back of it. If you just movement well enough, again, it's got that like finish line kind of mentality. You'll solve all your problems. You won't have any troubles. Because you can do sick moves, whatever, or you won't have any problems for some reason. And that obviously as you get there and as you get super, super good at all these things and you start to realize, okay, I'm good at this and it didn't do that.
Yeah.
Then what, right? Why do it from there? What's
Correct.
the point? So I just want to hear your angle on that and
Yeah.
where you went with that and how that shapes your curiosity and your exploration.
Yeah, and you know why I'm so stoked to chat with you because, like, these are the questions that I ask people, and then you're one of the few people who ask these questions, and so when I'm not like, if I ask that to the average punter, they look at you sideways and start rocking in the corner, and you're like, "What do you mean? Like, this is the juice of it, right? Like, this is the reason why we're even here in the first place." And so it's a level of desire for expansion of consciousness. It's something more, and you use the physical as a vessel, but you have been influential for me in the setting that there's three big elements that I was also very well aware of, and in my teaching and my mentors have been drumming this into me for nearly 20 years now, of this basically mind, body, spirit, or the Jing Shen Qi aspect, all of these these realms. Um, you kind of have to go there. I mean, you know very quickly. And the example which I'll give, it come to mind as you were saying it from my perspective. I actually found myself like the more that I trained, the more miserable I was becoming. It was like I would stand in front of a boxing bag, for example, by myself in a boiling hot shed, and I'm just literally pounding myself to death. And I'm saying like, if old school mentality, it's like I'm training harder than the person I don't even know yet, who I'm going to stand in a box with, and if I've done more, then I win. And it's cool. Like there's so much discipline and so much dedication, and I think they are the foundations needed in so many ways. So I don't, I admire that. I respect that about myself, and I respect that about you and people who do those discipline journeys. But the limitation is that you can become extremely good physically and be more miserable than you've ever been. And for me, I caught myself multiple times training so hard, and I'm like, "Yeah, this is punishment." Like, I am punishing myself, and it's getting worse. Like, it's like I come second, like, in whatever, the state, and it's like, that shit. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I just dove and rescued a guy from 20 meters underwater with, like, a pair of flippers on, and it's like, yeah, that was okay. Like, this satisfaction, it's different to humbleness, it's different to egolessness. It's like there's a problem there where everything you do, if you don't cultivate the mind and the spirit and an energy behind it, you're just getting better at it. So your attitude, if you're there just to punish yourself and train really hard, you're just getting better at that,
Yeah.
and it actually then, you're forgetting to smile, you're forgetting to celebrate little wins, you're forgetting to be childlike and creative. One of the biggest changes for me was years and years and years, every day, every day, every day, I'm training to fight. And I couldn't have flogged myself physically any harder. And I had a beautiful friend of mine who's a naturopath, and he went on to be the head teacher of many up and coming naturopaths, and certify them. And he did a lot of blood tests on me and a lot of different things. And he said to me, "Okay, Joe, the good news is I have athletes who have tried to get to some of your markers, and they're like, they're triathletes and they're enduro guys, and you've basically surpassed them all. Um, and the negative is your oxidative stress is literally through the roof, like you're about to die. Like it's like you've eaten yourself alive through the discipline, right?" And so I was like, okay, well, that's great. I know I have a capacity to destroy myself to success. And so it's like, well, that's not really fun, or that doesn't have heaps of longevity. So interestingly enough, I tried to sort of progress my endurance and this sensation that I wanted to go 10 rounds in the ring and feel really good. And it wasn't until I stopped training so stupidly and actually started to just sit and breathe and recover and meditate and do these things. And all of a sudden I'd come back in, and what was once this perceived ceiling just blew right open to a whole nother level. But what I did was not physical. What I did was energetic.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's like the biggest light bulb of my life. Boom, the whole room lights up. So I was like, wow, how far could this go? Like, so being me, I took it too far. So you're like, well, I'll just breathe and meditate for like 10 years more than anybody, and that will give me an upper edge. So I'm grateful for that stupidity as well, because it led me to the other side, and it's this giant pendulum, this giant seesaw, and that was my perspective of working out that there's more to this. And then people like yourself, thank God, walk into your life and then remind you, hey, there's three big elements here, there's three big circles, there's three big pillars. Let's actually see if there's some perceived balance between those, which has been the journey.
Yeah, that point you made about that pendulum swing, right? All that insanity you're talking about flogging yourself to death being physically performative,
Mm.
can easily come into that world of meditative and spiritual development, right? I'll just meditate till I'm the most enlightened person, more so than anyone else, or I'll just do all my breathing practices until and all of them have this until I'm better than everyone else, right?
Correct.
And that kind of elevating mindset that I want to be better than everyone. And that's such a lovely mindset because it pushes us to grow, right? But it goes
Mm.
feral when it's not balanced with a like letting go and accepting our
Yeah.
limitations. And like you said, sometimes you've just got to go to those limits to see what they're about and to prove to yourself, right? Because it's all good hearing some guy on a podcast say there's a limit when you train physically too much. And I've been on the couch my whole life, never train. It's like, oh, cool. There's my permission not to train.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
so you've got to actually have something to let go of. But that pressure can easily just move, right? It can transform. Oh, I've stopped the physical thing because I saw all the problems with that. Now I'm just going to do the exact same shit with energetic work or meditation or whatever.
Totally.
And it becomes still this performance game, right? How can I make the performance better? And it's not helping us in our day-to-day relationships, right? We can just be miserable meditating 4 hours a day instead of being miserable fighting 4 hours a day. And on the flip side, when we have these transitions, often when you burn those limits out, you want to just throw the whole thing away. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. There was so much good stuff. Like you said, that discipline, um, all that work you did was good. It was just too much. It just needs to come back a bit. It doesn't need to be thrown entirely out. And again, this is a problem I see over and over again, that people discover the world of internal cultivation. It's like, I did it too. Throw the physical away. Like, I don't need to do any of that stuff. I'll be the superior guy, just like this, like deeply relaxed body that can't lift a bag of sand if I need to. Um, so it's like, oh, right. It's actually this forever balancing thing, right? It doesn't arrive anywhere. It goes to this extreme and then I go too far. Okay, better come back. And it goes to this extreme and then I go too far. And it's like, oh, better come back. And slowly you actually temper that phasic cycling of that stuff until it starts to move with a rhythm rather than this like insane dropping off one end. And that's kind of where I see the business end of this, or the maybe the maturity of the cultivation work coming into it is actually when you get out of that kind of extremist ideology without ditching what that extreme was working on in that was really actually pragmatically and spiritually useful, right?
Yeah, correct. And look, I've watched it with you and it's been an amazing journey, another person who has such strong discipline. And the beautiful thing is if you stick at the whole practice long enough, you keep coming back onto center. It's a really positive thing because you're aware that there's many pillars to develop and you go into extremes and you keep getting feedback from the world that it's still not quite right. And so it just slowly just shapes you, as you said, and molds you into a more appropriate version. And what I find fascinating right now, and I think, if I was to sort of say, like, after all these years, what's the kind of core of your message and your understanding and what you really would love to share? And it's to broaden people's awareness that we're all so unique and we have to understand that each individual has so many different strengths and weaknesses, and we're not entirely sure what that is. We don't know the percentages. We don't know the exact data of how much that person's done in the physical world or the spiritual world or the mental world or the energetic world. We're not quite sure, and it's not really our job to be sure. It's exciting to allow individuals to say, hey, this is the journey. The journey is for you to go on your journey so you're aware yourself. It's like,
Yeah.
we don't want to be the last to find out that we're way off. You want to just have people around you to support you and encourage you and also keep you in check here and there. But you want to be the one swinging through the trees and just finding that really fine line, if you like.
Mm.
And that's really where it is. It's like, if we can all acknowledge that, we're all unique and we're all going on this journey, then it's so much more encouraging and
Yep.
exciting. And we don't have time. Like I hear people, they bag different sort of traditions and practices and all this. I don't have time for that because I'm just doing my thing and I'm constantly being humbled myself
Yep.
and then I'm working on that. So I don't know where the time comes to really get too involved with anyone else's journey. Like I'm not most people, as a professional, people ask me and that's a different situation. I'm
Yep.
helping as a guide through my experience. But to sort of just go out into the world and have all these opinions about sort of health and spirituality and all these things, I'm like, I don't know where that comes from, where the time is even available for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's this kind of deep desire to find this archetype that's perfect, right? If I just movement right and breathe right and meditate right, then again, I'll be this human with no problems. And look at all those guys with problems, haha, what idiots they are, you know? And that archetype just shifts and changes depending what discipline you're in. Because right, as soon as you shift into the movement discipline, you'll look at people and you're like, well, they probably can't handstand, and they definitely can't cartwheel with shoulders like that, and their flexibility is no good, blah, blah, blah. Well, what a bunch of idiots. But that person may be like a virtuoso on the piano, right? Making beautiful, moving music that has nothing to do with physical health, but impacting so many people. And then you shift into that frame set. Well, you know, I'm impacting all these people, and you're just working in some sort of lame back end job where you see 4 people a day, and aren't I better? You know, and it just comes back to this kind of superiority complex that we tend to have. And if I were to say anything about the cultivation arts the way I see them, I think they should bring us back down into humanity, right? Rather than trying to elevate us out of humanity. And in that getting back down into humanity, you start to recognize the others as being kind of like you. You're like, fuck, I've been at that particular point where you're struggling with that. And I know exactly what that feels like. And it sucks. But I also don't know what other work you've done that's way like I'm stuck at, right? I might be stuck at this particular junction you worked that out 10 years ago.
Totally.
It's impossible to say. So you stop getting this like, I'm a better human than you. At the same time, the clarity of the skill set becomes obvious. You can see if someone does better handstands or is more flexible, but it doesn't lend credence to the value of their humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you throw a bit of death and a few parents, with issues, or, you have 10 kids, or, you strap for cash, or there's so many things that life will sort you out with. And I think that's important. I think it needs to be there because it brings back humility and it brings back humbleness. And, I had a tough year last year, and I spoke to you about many of those things personally. And, I think the one thing that come out of it was strong for me was like, when I see people, I'm like, my first point of reference is like, I hope you're okay. That's the framework in which that, 20 years of practice, I'm coming, I go, I hope you're okay. Meaning, we've all got these things and these battles. And a beautiful way that I look at it is like, instead of this, hierarchy and triangles and pyramids and all of these sort of, these shapes, I guess, it's like a giant circle. And even finding orientation, it's like, our particular north, for example, like we don't know where north is, like we just shoot in a direction and we don't have a reference point, and we haven't mapped out that 360 degrees uh, very well, or if not at all. So we shoot north, and then all of a sudden we're like, yeah, look, that what I thought was north, like just flat out handstands, that's, that didn't really work. Now my wrists are broken and, my shoulder's funky. I'm just going to sit and meditate, and that's like full south. And then you're like,
Coughing at the handstanders, right?
totally. And then you're like, yeah, and then all your like, your joints get all weird from just sitting for so long, and you just sort of start getting a little bit weak, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go and, do martial arts, and it's West, and whatever it may be. But I think it's important, the prerequisite to having that sort of humbleness and humility where you start to just focus back on yourself and work on the things you need to work on and have full compassion and understanding of other people. Unfortunately, there is a bit of a prerequisite that you shoot off really
Yeah.
passionately, and you overspeak about things you're not quite sure of, and it's a natural progression. And I think it's like, I don't want to say this, in the wrong way, but it's like you kind of just want to get in there and get that out of the way, like as
Yeah.
fast as you possibly can. But just go hard, make all the mistakes, and hopefully you're still hanging on at the end. And if you do, you'll probably become quite a decent teacher, or quite a decent leader, or you'll be, let's even say you'll just be more valuable, as a community or a family member because you have a better map or a better circle of points of reference. So the tradie comes and speaks to you, or the grandma, or the spiritual teacher, and you can speak their language. You know that there's threads that you can connect to, but if you shoot in one direction and that's your direction, then that's amazing. And you can even master things. And then there's this giant, there's 359 degrees in which you have, limited perspective. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just understanding that. And so I guess it comes down to what do people want to do with their practice?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
For me personally, it's understanding many people from many perspectives,
Yeah.
and therefore understanding myself more deeply.
Yeah, or I always had this idea that I want to look out on the world and all the people in it and just can't help but recognize myself. So,
Mhm.
especially the shitty people, right? You look at the,
Yeah.
the whatever the Donald Trumps, or pick a politician you hate and look at them and be like, oh, how am I like that? Like, and you just, oh, right, there's all those times I was exactly like that, right? And what you were saying about that need to get through that, that's actually crucial development as far as I see, because if you haven't experienced that you're like that, if you haven't been the kind of evangelical dick, like abusing people who aren't doing your own thing, when you see other people doing that, you'll immediately kind of not empathize. You won't be able to connect or relate because you haven't been there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
so actually the more we get in the shit, and hopefully survive and come out the other end, all right, the more we can be like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I get it. I've been there. I understand what it's like to be in that, where you can't be convinced otherwise and no amount of anything being said to you." And that just tends to soften the tone of as people get more masterful, they get way more like, someone the what's that? The Dunning-Kruger chart, right? Where you've got the rapid rise of skill at the start, and then you've got Mount Stupid, and then it kinda, like, falls off, and then you've got, like, the slow climb up. And when you get to the end of that slow climb, the people you met master of any trade, they're always the most humble people
Yeah.
because they've been through the shit, because
Yeah.
even if it's not the same category exploring, it's the same type of stuff, right? You'll have that person who thinks they know everything, then there's like the crash, realizing they don't really know anything, and then all the work to get back to somewhere. And that constant knowledge of like, oh well, there's always a bigger fish in the sea, and there's always someone better than this at me. And despite my many years, I still feel like a bit of a noob at a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And that almost gets stronger, and you start going, okay, well, yeah, I can do this stuff pretty confidently, but in the scheme of things, I've been connected with people who can do it 20 times better than me, and you stop having that need to be at the top of that chart, and you just come back to where you are at the moment and cruising along, and you start to then feel that the other people, however they're acting, however insane they're going, are just in their same little kind of, rhythm of falling off a cliff, and you're like, "Huh," or jumping back out of it and, like, coming into glory or whatever, There's
Yeah.
there's all of that going on, and I find that what I like about what you do and the journey I've been on is so similar because it constantly comes back to that center, like you said. It's like, oh, there was the extreme and then back. And you don't immediately go, well, no one's allowed on the extreme, right? It was shit out there. Trust me, don't go. Like, you're like, oh, yeah, just go, have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I think that's the ultimate path of it. It is again, it's humbleness and humility, and it. I think the whole thing points to this point of orientation, and it's like the orientation is where you are, and you're recognizing that you're recognizing your limitations, or you're recognizing how far you still have to go, but you're not then critical and judgmental of where everybody else is. And in the early times, it's very easy to see people, saying this particular type of movement will basically just free your entire being and you're going to be the best human ever to exist. And you sort of want to, in the early days, you want to sort of judge it and fight against it, but you just, through your journey, you recognize that unfortunately, as ugly as it can be, is, as you said, crucial. It's crucial to development. And I think, look, it is actually a really important point, and it's worth kind of, reiterating, I guess. It's like, for me, and I assume there's a lot of this for yourself as well, it's like being in this field, I guess, or this health and sort of spiritual and open sort of, community in many ways, it is important for us to sort of maybe try to get there a little quicker than we have, because it's a sea of noise and you can get very lost, and it can pull away from your own individual journey,
Yeah.
because we're dealing with more noise than we ever have. Like, for me, to find my teachers originally, like, it was a one-time call from a friend, and I flew across multiple countries and got in tuk-tuks and walked down alleyways to find a faded A4 piece of paper on a old brick building by a river. Like, it was legit like that. So, that's how I kind of found guidance within that setting. So it was sort of traditional. It was like sort of old school, and more like the old, sort of the Taoist teachings and things. And, you've got some elder there and he's trying to teach like an excited little kid a lesson. He just points at the sun or points at the wind blowing and, and you think it's so far away, but it is sort of true. And I do empathize a little bit with the challenge of this particular field and industry right now, because I don't know how I would have gone if I started right now, with the enthusiasm and openness and energy that I had when I was 22. So I do empathize with that, and I'm sure these people are capable and they'll work it out, and I have no doubt of that. But I can't really comment on what it feels like to start now. All I can observe is that there's a lot more noise than it was when I started. And so in that's why I say I reiterate this point that it's very easy to get lost, confused, and dragged in 1,000 directions. That's pretty natural. You've got more of those now. Let's encourage you to find the pendulum balance a little more acutely, a little faster, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Not just waiting for it to passively appear.
Yeah, like hunt that a little bit more, like keep that more of a guided focus than just me and you kind of like not randomly, but you just kind of obviously random. Yeah, you bounce and you bounce and then you're like, oh, I'm back on center. That feels more relaxed. But there's probably a more active seeking now of center. Is
Yeah, yeah. I think it needs to be made more apparent. It needs to be pointed out from the start rather than like left in the implicit side of things that it'll just come around to eventually, which it will. But like you said, we're in chaotic waters these days, and back in when you would have done that adventure, there was like no one else around doing that stuff, right? These days, you just like give me an enlightened person on the internet with 15 people on your block. I like, you know, oh, it's just the next door neighbor, right? And even like, not to say they're all charlatans or anything like that. There's legitimate, like you can just find legitimate epic people with like a 5-second search and they're just around the
totally.
corner. And it's just, it's, oh, I can see him, but like just 3 blocks down, there's another epic dude doing something else. And now I can see them. And which one do I go? And, it becomes
Yep.
this mess of choice. So like you said, that further encourages that chaotic, like diving off edges. So to actually have, an orientation around a kind of balance point, and for me, more and more coming back to orient the practice not about getting to a particular destination, as in like a skill progression, but
Mm.
how does this practice get me back connected to myself as I am right now, sitting on a chair, looking at Joe on the monitor, you know, talking about whatever we're talking about. Is that what I'm accomplishing with my training?
Yes.
Um, and that kind of careful, like, don't then go, well, in 5 years I'll be more connected, which is its own little trap. But orienting that from the start, I've definitely found, and I've been emphasizing it a lot in the last year or so, and it helps people a lot. It's really like actually making people like calm down and not being that frantic. If I just get whatever, then I'll be okay, because that obviously just goes on indefinitely until you
Yeah.
annihilate yourself.
And look, it is true. I think as you journey more with it, you become more as a role model and more as a leader or a mentor. And I think it's important that you be more and more. And myself, like I try to be more and more transparent. And I say to people, please look, what I do and how I do things has nothing to do with you and has nothing to do with the right way or anything. It's like it's a personal journey that I've worked out for myself that I need to do. It's a necessity for my spiritual development. It's a necessity for my understanding of myself. It's an orientation place. And so my encouragement is for you to find that. The issue that's probably there is that people are willing to say the other and say, no, 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 follow me. And this is the right one. So there's many low hanging fruit that can drag you off center. But the, the scope in which you sort of come back to can be so different. And I actually remember one day, and I don't know, Simon would probably, whether he says it often or not, but it's something that really sunk in for me, 10 or so years ago. He said, you're going to do all this movement practice and you're training and you're moving. And in the end, if you work out then that you love playing piano, then that's progression. Like you worked out something else about yourself because of the practice. And I think it's an intelligent perspective because, as you said, we're not like, what are we aiming for? Like, world champion what? Like it has nothing to do with that. So as long as our training, we remember that it's something that's bringing us back to our true core, a true sense of self, within a full living matrix that we're connected to. I think it's a beautiful, exciting and necessary and, rewarding journey that's like we all have access to that and it's beautiful, but it does take a little bit of grit to put a few walls up around you and protect yourself in that because you can get dragged fast.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you're keen and when you've got that seeker's mindset that'll want to grab on to the next best thing, right? Now I've got the good thing. Now I've got the good thing, and that turns foul every single time. But at the same time, that will be the reason for your growth, right? It's the thing that got me like just becoming evangelical about whatever topic I was going into, which is kind of in my nature a bit. It's like that's what got me to where I am today.
Mhm.
At the same time, I want to start actually becoming more aware of that function so that or well, to give a recent example, I left the Dallas school I was part of for 10 years, and I just felt that thing going, "Who's the next person that has all the answers, right? Just give them all my agency." Whoa, and then it's like, "Wait up, come back, come back, come back." I can still learn things from people, but I'm keeping that now. I'm not gonna give that away anymore.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave that with myself, and so then I can learn for sure, but I'm not
Mm.
learning by giving myself away to that person or to that system or anything like that. And that's got this sense of homecoming and, it's like, "Oh, there's coming back to my center." That's actually more centered than the technical centering practice I was doing in the Dallas school, right?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we can possibly point that out a little bit more early on.
Yeah, for sure. And I've actually reached out to a few mentors just this week, and I've asked that question. What do you do when you need to come back to yourself and actually, have the confidence, I guess, and the courage to go back to yourself all the time. And it just becomes apparent that it's pretty simple. It's like it's this, this deep, loving, connected, real, heart-centered base of yourself, and the rest of it is just kind of child exploration, and you keep falling back. And I think, again, it's more important than we sort of give credit to at the moment. So yeah, something that a lot of people are going to benefit from fast
Yep.
tracking that.
Yep. All right, I think that's a pretty nice spot to start to wrap things up. So maybe just to finish this off, can you just tell the listeners a bit about what you're doing now, what you offer? Like you do some classes. I know you're getting some online stuff kicking into gear. You do some mentoring of your own, as far as I understand. But yeah, just let everyone know what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And, just personal one-on-one, consulting's like just the thing that's sort of at the core for me still and always has been because I mean, I love teaching group, experiences and, retreats and workshops and things like that. But it's very difficult to sort of really then give somebody an individual sort of guidance of where what they can do. And I think that's just obviously been on my map because mostly that's how people reach out. They say, hey, like I resonate with this part and I feel like you'd actually be able to, individually help me a little bit to sort of guide me. So that's definitely what it is. And, like the medicine side of things, I love making Ayurvedic sort of medicines. It's the area that I know really well. And it's something that I'm, continuing to develop. And, I've had these same blends over and over again. And that's something that's beautiful that I really love doing. As far as my actual, practice, in sharing in the world, it's just to whatever people are interested in and whatever they're doing. I do want to bring like spirit and depth into that. And I don't mind what it is for people. So it's like now I'm focused on just yeah, like, you go bow hunting or you go and weight train or you go and do a martial art. How are you doing it? That's the part that I like to work with people and groups and point that out because it's not up to me and I have no say in what you do or how, what you do. That's beautiful, unique and individual. That's amazing. But I think spirit can come in to that. I think beauty and awe and wonder and appreciation and gratitude can be the anchor point and the orientation for that. So that's really the education now. And, I have a couple of beautiful friends who, we're creating this beautiful business and it is a health orientated business. And we have, body therapies and medicine and functional medicine and osteopathy and all these things which we're cultivating and pulling in together. But the root of it is to teach people to become more of who they really are and less influenced by the noise and explore themselves with a little bit more guidance or focus on just not bouncing as hard as maybe I have or as hard as other people, just to sort of save them a little bit from some unnecessary wandering. That it can get quite lost out there in the world. So they're the things. And other than that, I got 4 kids, and we had 12 boys stay here on Saturday night, and it was like just absolutely like a hoot and awesome and carnage yarn. And so, mine's like life skills, it's like
Yeah.
I'm learning how to stitch and I'm learning how to do like bush first aid because I'm out in the world. And so I'm trying to bring, spirit into everything that I do, daily things, natural things. And I still do all my practices, and they vary, but there's a central hub and a central theme to that. So it's really, the core is guidance for
Are you
individuals.
doing that just locally, or you're on Zoom online consults as well?
Yeah, Zoom online consults and then all the local
Cool.
connections. Yeah.
Cool. So for people who don't know, Joe is in Newcastle in Australia, which is just a bit north of Sydney. If you're in the area, I highly recommend hitting him up.
Mhm.
Um, he'll point you to all the other cool people in Newcastle as
Mm.
well, and I hope to have some of them on the podcast at some point and have a chat to a few of the crew down there because there's some really good eggs uh, gathering in Newcastle for whatever reason. It's a strange place for it, but it's cool as there's like a hyper concentration of cool people down there. So yeah, thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for having a chat, and maybe we can do part two at some point in the future. I'll put your website and stuff in the show notes so people know how to contact you. And yeah, anything you wanted to leave the end of the show with, or
No, just yeah, thanks heaps, and yeah, enjoy your journey, and don't be afraid to reach out for some guidance from different people around you, and it's okay to sort of seek for that little bit of perfection, and you can sort of go hard at it, and just keep your eyes, you keep yourself alert, and if you got your foot on the accelerator, then go for it, but just make sure you know where the brake is, and you sort of can drive it a little bit because it's important, and times are changing fast, and there's a lot of information, so just you keep grounding yourself in that, and otherwise don't stop sort of seeking to learn.
excellent. All right, thanks everyone, and hope you enjoyed this episode. And please tune in for the next one. I will have more cool people like Joe
Mm.
on it very soon. Have a good week.